I was 8 years old the first time I realized I was invisible. Not literally, of course. I had arms and legs, a voice, a name. But when you grow up in a house where every photo on the wall shows your brother's face and none of yours, you start to wonder if maybe you were just background noise in someone else's life. We lived in a quiet suburb with neatly trimmed lawns and identical mailboxes. Our house had this white fence that my mom loved to repaint every summer. Inside, everything was warm and cozy. Soft light, the smell of something always baking. But for all its comfort, there was one thing that made it feel cold to me: the walls. They were covered in pictures. Dozens of them. Matt winning his first soccer game. Matt in his Halloween costume. Matt holding up a science trophy. There was maybe one of me, in a blurry kindergarten cap and gown, shoved in the corner behind a lamp. Dinner that night was just like every other night. Matt sat at the head of the table, talking about how he'd scored the winning goal in gym class, and my parents hung on every word like it was breaking news. "Coach thinks I should try out for the travel team," Matt said between bites of chicken. "He said I've got a natural instinct." My mom gasped like she was watching her favorite actor win an Oscar. "That's incredible, sweetie." Dad gave one of his rare smiles. "Proud of you, son." I waited until Matt took a breath before I cleared my throat. I got something today too." They barely looked as I held up a crinkled piece of paper. "Outstanding Creativity Award," I read aloud. "For my story in English class." My mom gave a quick smile. "That's nice, Jake." Then she turned right back to Matt. "Do you think the travel team would interfere with school too much?" I slowly lowered the paper back into my lap. After dinner, I went up to my room and sat on the bed. The certificate beside me like a little secret. My room was quiet. No trophies. No posters. Just a few drawings I'd taped to the wall and a stuffed dinosaur I was probably too old to keep, but never could quite put away. I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time I felt special. My 7th birthday came to mind. We'd planned a small party, balloons, cake, a few friends from school. I remember waking up so excited I could barely eat breakfast. But a few hours before the party, Matt twisted his ankle during basketball practice. My parents canceled everything. "We can't have guests while Matt's in pain," Mom had said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. They didn't reschedule. My friends didn't come. I just sat on the front steps in my party hat, watching the wind knock over the balloon bouquet. Even then, I told myself it was just bad timing. But now, a year later, I was starting to understand. Matt wasn't just the older brother. He was the perfect son. And me? I was the one who tried too hard, said too little, and hoped for scraps of attention that never came. I looked down at my certificate again and whispered something I don't think I fully understood at the time. If I can just get better, maybe they'll see me. By the time I turned 17, I had stopped expecting much from my parents. No praise, no real attention. Just the occasional good job, Jake, if I managed to stay out of trouble and kept my grades high enough. At school, I blended in. I wasn't the smartest or the funniest or the most popular. I was just there. And honestly, I'd gotten used to it. What kept me going was a rusted '92 Chevy sitting in our garage. I'd bought it off a neighbor for a few $100. All the money I'd earned from stacking boxes at the local hardware store after school and on weekends. It didn't run, not yet, but it was mine. I'd spend hours in that garage, sleeves rolled up, grease on my hands, headphones in. That car made sense. It had problems, but they were fixable. You couldn't say the same about people. That spring, I got a letter from the university I'd applied to. Full tuition. Not a partial scholarship, full. 4 years, everything covered. I stood there staring at the letter like it might vanish if I blinked. I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding, the envelope in my hand. Mom was stirring something on the stove. Dad sat at the table, reading the paper. "I got the scholarship," I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. "Full ride. They're covering everything." Mom looked up, blinked, then smiled faintly. "That's nice, honey." Dad barely glanced at me. "That's good." "What school was it again?" "State U," I said. "Their engineering programs ranked really high." Before I could finish, the front door opened. "Hey!" came a familiar voice. "Matt." Of course. He strolled into the kitchen like he owned the place. His hair was a little longer, his smile still movie star bright. He dropped his bag, grabbed a soda from the fridge and started talking before anyone asked. "So I've got news," he said, cracking the can open. Celia landed a summer internship in DC government affairs. Pretty competitive, only a few spots nationwide. I watched the way Mom's face lit up like it was Christmas morning. Dad folded his paper and leaned in. "No kidding," he said. "That's impressive. We should celebrate." "I was thinking the same," Matt said. "Maybe have a few people over this weekend?" "I'll call your aunt," Mom said, already reaching for her phone. I stood there, the scholarship letter still in my hand, unnoticed. The party was on Saturday. White lights in the backyard, appetizers on silver trays, laughter echoing through the night. Everyone talking about Matt, his internship, his brilliance, his future. I was the one who parked cars for the guests because Dad didn't want them blocking the street. At some point, Dad came outside to grab another drink. He spotted me, by the garage. "You know," he said, standing next to me, "you could learn a lot from your brother." I didn't answer. "Matt's got direction, ambition. You've got potential too, Jake. But you need to focus. Be more like him. Be more like him." That phrase stuck in my throat like a splinter. Later that night, I sat in the garage beside the Chevy, my fingers trailing the cracked leather on the steering wheel. I pulled the scholarship letter from my back pocket, now wrinkled and smudged with sweat. I should have felt proud. I should have been happy. But instead I felt hollow. Like no matter what I did, how hard I worked, it would never matter. Not to them. I wasn't the golden boy. I was the shadow behind him. And for the first time in my life, I started to wonder if maybe that would never change. College felt like a fresh start. New people, new routines, a place where no one knew me as Matt's little brother. I studied hard, kept my head down, made some quiet friends, and finally felt like I was building something for myself. One rainy Thursday I ducked into a small off-campus cafe to wait out a thunderstorm before my evening class. I ordered coffee, grabbed a corner seat and pulled out my notes. That's when someone called my name. "Jake?" I looked up. A guy about my brother's age was squinting at me, tall, tan, athletic build. He had that overconfident smirk I recognized from years of family parties. "It's Ben. Ben Kramer. I went to high school with Matt. We were on the swim team together." "Oh," I said, offering a polite smile. "Yeah, I think I remember." He pulled out a chair without asking and sat down. Apparently small talk wasn't optional. "So, how's your brother? Still crushing life like always?" "Last I heard," I said, trying to sound neutral, "he's doing fine." Ben chuckled and shook his head. "Man, your brother always had the craziest luck. Remember senior year? That AP Calc exam where he didn't study and still pulled an A?" I raised an eyebrow. "He told me he studied all weekend for that." Ben laughed. "Nah, man. He got the answers from Jen Callahan. She snuck a copy from the TA's office. He talked her into it." "Classic Matt." I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. "Wait, he cheated?" "Come on," Ben said, still grinning. "It's not like anyone got hurt, and it's not like it was the only time." "You think he actually wrote that history paper junior year?" The grin faded from my face. Ben shrugged, sensing my reaction. "Look, I'm not trying to stir anything up. Your brother was cool, we all did dumb stuff, he just knew how to play the game." He stood, gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder, and walked out, leaving me with a cold cup of coffee and a knot in my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every conversation, every family dinner, every proud announcement of Matt's latest accomplishments. I'd built this mental image of him, this untouchable example of success. And now, it was crumbling, piece by piece. I called home the next evening. Mom answered on the second ring. "Jake." "Hi, honey. Everything okay?" "I talked to someone today," I said. "One of Matt's old friends. He told me some things." There was a pause. "What things?" "He said Matt cheated on tests, that he used other people's work. More than once." Silence. "Mom?" She exhaled. "Jake, that's ridiculous. Matt would never do something like that." "He did. Ben told me." "Ben?" She cut in. "That boy's always been a troublemaker. Don't believe everything you hear. I just thought you should know. I thought maybe—" "Jake," she said firmly. "This sounds like jealousy." "What?" "You've always felt like you were in his shadow. I get it. But trying to tear him down, that's not fair. To him, or to us." My throat tightened. "I'm not trying to tear anyone down," I said quietly. "I'm trying to understand." "Matt has never given us a reason not to trust him," she said. "This isn't like you. Isn't like—" I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up. I sat on the floor of my dorm room for a long time after that. Just numb. It wasn't just about Matt anymore. It was the realization that no matter what he did, they wouldn't see it. Or maybe they just didn't want to. All my life, I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd finally notice me. But the truth was much harder to swallow. They never wanted to. I remember that night too clearly. The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead, casting a yellow hue across the table. Mom had made beef stew. The smell should have been comforting, nostalgic even, but all it did was make my stomach twist. I was already on edge, and then my phone rang. It was my manager from the cafe. I'd been working there part-time during college. Nothing glamorous, just steady work and decent tips. "Hey Jake," he said. And I could tell something was wrong from his tone. "Can you come in? There's something we need to talk about." 10 minutes later, I was in the office, facing him and someone from HR. "Over the weekend, cash went missing from the safe," he said. "A few $100s. Not life-changing, but enough to raise concern." I blinked. "Okay. And?" "Well," he continued, carefully, "only 2 employees had access to the safe code. You, and Matt." Matt, my brother. He had come back home for a break after his internship supposedly ended early. Said he just needed to breathe, but I always sensed something wasn't right. "You're seriously thinking I took it?" I asked. "No one's accusing anyone yet," my manager said, but his eyes avoided mine. "We're just trying to get to the bottom of it." I walked out of that cafe with a pit in my stomach. I already knew where this was headed. I just didn't expect how fast it would unravel. When I got home, everyone was gathered in the kitchen, like they were waiting for me. Mom stood at the counter, arms folded. Dad sat at the head of the table, stone-faced. Matt leaned casually against the fridge, like this was all just another story he was about to spin. "You're late," Dad said. "We need to talk." I looked around, already feeling the verdict before the trial. "I didn't take anything," I said. "If that's what this is about," Matt sighed dramatically, shaking his head like he was disappointed in me. "They asked me about the missing cash," he said. I didn't want to believe it either, but... "Come on, Jake, you've been stressed. Maybe things are tight." My jaw clenched. "So, you think I stole it?" "I'm not saying that," he replied, holding up his hands. "But I didn't take it. And the money's gone. Someone has to be responsible." I turned to our parents, expecting, hoping for some hesitation. A question. A doubt. Anything. But Dad just shook his head. "I'm disappointed," he said, voice cold. "Really thought we raised you better." Mom didn't meet my eyes. "We don't know what's going on with you anymore." "Are you serious?" I asked. "You're just going to take his word for it?" "We're not taking sides," Mom said quickly. "But this isn't the first time you've acted distant. Maybe this is a cry for help." A cry for help? I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "I didn't do it," I said, firmly now. "I would never steal. And if you actually knew me, if you ever bothered to see me, you'd know that." But I saw it. The decision had already been made. The gavel had dropped before I even walked in the room. Matt stayed quiet. His eyes didn't leave mine, but they didn't show guilt either. Just relief. Like he'd gotten away with something again. I took one last look at them, at the people I'd spent my entire life trying to impress. To be enough for. And they looked back at me like I was a stranger. Then Mom said the words I'd never forget. "You're not the son we hoped you'd be." That was it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out the door. And in my head, I made a promise. I will never come back. Not for them. Not for Matt. Not for anyone. When I left home, I didn't have a grand plan. No roadmap. Just a backpack, a few $100s, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones when you've been trying too hard for too long. I moved to a new city, far enough to feel like a fresh start, but not so far that it didn't still ache when I thought of home. I found a room above a bakery that smelled like burnt cinnamon in the mornings. The walls were thin, the faucet dripped, and the heater coughed in the winter. But it was mine. The first few months were survival. I picked up shifts at a bookstore during the day, and washed dishes at a diner at night. My feet always hurt. I slept in layers because I couldn't afford the heating bill. But for the first time, the silence in my life wasn't filled with someone else's expectations. It was just quiet. And I could breathe. I met Emily on a rainy Tuesday. She came into the bookstore, soaked and frustrated, looking for a specific poetry collection. We didn't have it. I offered to order it. She smiled, not out of politeness but like she actually meant it. And before I could stop myself I said, "There's a coffee shop next door, The owner lets me drink for free if I help him move boxes. Wanna wait there? To my surprise, she said yes. That's how it started. Coffee and soggy shoes. She was sharp, quicker with words than I ever was, and she asked questions no one else had bothered to ask me before. Not what do you do, but what keeps you going? She listened, really listened, and never tried to fix me. She just stayed. And I stayed too. We moved in together a year later. A one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The paint peeled in places, and the shower groaned like an old man, but it felt more like home than the house I grew up in ever did. We got married in the spring. No guests from my side. No need to explain. She knew about my past. Not just the events, but the weight they carried. She saw the cracks in me and called them character, not damage. We didn't have kids, not yet. Not because we couldn't, but because we wanted to wait. To build something solid first. Something different from what I came from. Something whole. I worked hard. Saved. Built up enough to quit the diner and take on a better paying job at a local firm. I wore shirts without stains, fixed the faucet myself, bought Emily flowers on random Thursdays. There were nights when I'd lie awake and think about Matt, about my parents. Not because I missed them exactly, but because some part of me still wondered why I hadn't been enough. That question lingered in the background of my life. Quiet but constant, like the hum of a refrigerator in the dark. But it didn't control me anymore. Emily once said, "You didn't run away, Jake. You rebuilt. That's different." And, I think, she was right. It started with a headline. I wasn't looking for it. I was just scrolling through my phone during a lunch break when I saw his name. Matthew Carter under investigation for financial misconduct. My thumb froze mid-scroll. For a second I thought it was someone else. Some other Matthew Carter. But the photo, confident smile, tailored suit, that same look I'd seen my whole life, made it unmistakable. Matt had fallen. And hard. The articles came fast. A string of questionable deals, whispers of embezzlement, investors pulling out, lawsuits, debts, public statements that felt hollow even on paper. My golden brother, the one who could do no wrong, was now the face of everything he once mocked: failure, disgrace, scandal. I didn't know how to feel. There was no satisfaction, not really. Just a strange numbness. The call came that evening. I stared at the screen as Mom lit up. I hadn't seen that name flash in over 3 years. Emily looked at me from across the room, a quiet question in her eyes. I answered, against my better judgment. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Jake, honey, I know it's been a while." I didn't say anything. "Matt's going through something terrible. I thought you should know." I could hear the tremble in her throat, the barely contained panic. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't apologize. Just launched into how Matt was struggling, how the stress was too much, how they were trying to hold the family together. Then came the ask. "Could you maybe come, help, just talk to him? He listens to you. Always has." I almost laughed. Listens to me? Matt had spent his life tuning me out. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just ended the call with a flat, "I'll think about it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Emily, staring at the ceiling, the past playing like a silent film behind my eyes. The kitchen where my mother once said, "We're disappointed in you." The look in my father's eyes the day I left. The party they threw for Matt when he got his internship. The silence when I told them I'd gotten a scholarship. Now they needed me. Or maybe they just had no one else left. When I told Emily about the call, she listened quietly. When I finished, she asked just one question. "Are you thinking about going?" I hesitated. "I don't know." She sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. "Jake, they didn't just forget you, they rejected you. And now that Matt's drowning, suddenly you matter?" I could feel the anger in her voice. Anger for me, not at me. "I know," I said. "But he's still my brother. And you're still their son," she said, softer now. "But they only remember that when they need something." I didn't respond. Because deep down part of me wanted to go. Not to help Matt, but to see them. To show them what I'd become. To stand in that house again. Not as the forgotten one, but as a man who'd built something from nothing. But Emily's words echoed louder than any memory. "You don't owe them anything." I hadn't been back in that house for nearly 4 years. It looked smaller. Not physically, just less significant. The flowers by the porch were wilted, the paint on the railing chipped. I remembered how pristine everything used to be when guests were coming over. Today, no one had bothered. Emily offered to come with me. I told her I needed to do this alone. I stood at the front door for a long time before knocking. My reflection in the glass startled me. I looked calm. Older. Like someone who had nothing left to prove. My mother opened the door. Her face was a mixture of shock and relief. "Jake," she breathed out like a prayer. She reached to hug me, but I took a small step back. Not rudely, just firmly. It was enough to make her freeze. "Come in," she said quietly. The house smelled the same. Lemons and old wood. Familiar photos lined the hallway walls, still all of Matt. Football trophies, graduation pictures, that framed article about his first job. As if nothing had changed. My father stood in the living room, hands in his pockets. Matt was on the couch, hunched over, staring at the floor. He looked thinner, more worn down. But I didn't feel pity. "Jake," my father said with a slow nod. "Glad you came." I didn't respond. I sat in the chair across from them and pulled a folded paper from my coat pocket. "I'm not here to catch up," I said. "I'm here to say something, and I need you to hear all of it." They shifted. Matt looked up, just for a second, and then back down. I unfolded the page. "You always said Matt was the example I should follow, that he was the perfect son. When I got into college on a scholarship, no one celebrated. But when Matt got an unpaid internship, you threw a party." I paused, keeping my voice steady. "When I called to say I made Dean's List, you told me to work harder. When I said I got promoted, you said Matt was struggling and I should be more like him, because he never gave up." My mother's lips trembled. My father's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here for an apology. I stopped needing one a long time ago. I just want you to understand something. I made a life without you. I worked, I built, I loved, and I did it with people who saw me. Not just as Matt's little brother, but as a man, a whole person." Matt finally looked at me. "I know about the lies," I said, locking eyes with him. "The times you threw me under the bus to protect yourself. I took it. I swallowed it. I walked away because I refused to become like you." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "Don't. I'm not here for excuses." I stood. "I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to clean up this mess. You wanted me gone, and now you need me. But that doesn't mean you deserve me." I turned to my parents. "You taught me that love was conditional, that respect had to be earned from me but never from you. I spent years trying to become the son you could finally be proud of, and in the end the only person I needed to be proud of me was me." I folded the paper and put it back in my coat. "I hope you figure things out. I truly do. But not with my help." My mother whispered, "Jake, please." I looked at her. She seemed so small now. So human. "You once said I wasn't the son you hoped I'd be," I said gently. "Well, I'm finally okay with that." I walked out, not slamming the door, not looking back. The air outside felt cooler. Lighter. Like something had finally loosened in my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from that house. I was leaving on my terms. It was one of those quiet Sunday mornings, when the world felt like it had exhaled. Emily and I walked along the riverfront trail, hands intertwined, the sun filtering through pale green leaves above us. The air smelled faintly of coffee and spring. Dogs barked in the distance. A kid on a scooter zipped by with a laugh that made us both smile. I hadn't said much yet. She didn't rush me. I watched the water drift by, slow, steady, unbothered by the chaos around it. "They looked older," I finally said. "My parents, tired, almost lost." Emily gave my hand a gentle squeeze, but stayed quiet. I expected to feel angry. Vindicated, maybe. But I just felt done. Like I'd turned the last page of a long book and didn't need to read it again. She stopped walking and faced me. "That's because you've outgrown it." I nodded. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally understood that no matter how much I gave, it was never going to be enough for them. And that has nothing to do with me. Her eyes were soft. "You don't owe them your peace, Jake." I let out a breath. "I know." And for the first time I believe that. Later, back in our apartment, I made us coffee while she read on the couch, legs tucked under her, wrapped in that old gray cardigan I loved. I watched her for a moment. The way her brow furrowed slightly as she flipped a page. The way she looked up and smiled at me without saying a word, just being there, like she always was. "I never really knew what a home felt like," I said, handing her the mug. "Until this." Emily tilted her head. "This? You. Us." This quiet. This choice. She placed the coffee on the table and took my hand again. You built this life, Jake. You chose peace, even when you were raised in chaos. That takes strength most people never find. I sat beside her, and pulled her close. For years I thought closure would come from them, my family. An apology. A moment of clarity. A rewrite of the past. But the truth is, closure wasn't a door they had to open. It was one I had to close for myself. They taught me something, even if it was through pain. They taught me the kind of man I didn't want to be. And that was a gift, in its own strange way. I kissed Emily's forehead. I think I'm finally ready to stop looking backward, I said softly. She smiled. Good. Because everything worth looking at is right here. We stayed like that a while, no words, just warmth, just silence. And as I held her, one thought settled quietly, completely, into place. Some families are chosen. And mine begins with her.